Welcome everyone, I'm Councillor Steve Pitt, I'm the leader of the Council, but as Councillor Susie Horn, the Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education is currently away on leave. The decision-making powers of the Children's Family and Education portfolio at this meeting have been delegated to me. This delegation is to commence at the start of the meeting and cease at its close. A bit of housekeeping before we start. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street, past the University's Park building. To comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Draw everyone's attention to the fact the meeting will be webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera use to webcast this meeting. Everyone speaking will be on camera. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they've finished. We'll now do some introductions. So I've said who I am, and I'll now go to Dem Services next.
Good afternoon, Karen Martin, Democratic Services Officer.
Welcome, Karen.
Hi, I'm Mark Jabb, the Head of Service for Children We Care For.
Welcome, Mark.
Sarah Daly, Director of Children, Families and Education.
Welcome, Sarah.
Alison Edgerton, Group Accountant, Children, Families and Education Finance.
Welcome, Alison. Sharing the microphone with
Angela Mann, Finance Manager for Children.
Welcome, Angela.
Mike Stoneman, Deputy Director for Education.
Welcome, Mike.
Kate Mullen, Head of Inclusion.
Welcome, Kate. And finally, but by no means least,
Thank you. Councillor Hannah Brent for Drayton and Farlington.
and a big welcome to you as well, Hannah. Okay, we have one apology for absence today from Councillor Tom Coles, who messaged both myself and Democratic Services earlier to say that he tried to get out of work, but he was unable to swap his shift. And since we know what pressure QA is under at the moment, that's hardly a surprise. So apologies noted for him. I have no declarations of interest, Hannah.
No, so my only declaration is working for the City of Portsmouth College should it come up around further education.
Yeah, there are no deputations, so we go straight to item 3, which is the South East Regional Care Cooperative, or the RCC, which we'll use as a shorthand today, so poor old Mark doesn't have to keep saying it. And we'll hand over to Mark Jowett, who's the Head of Children We Care For.
Thank you. So, the report is in relation to an Invest Safe proposal that recommends that the Cabinet Member agrees the proposed scope and purpose of the RCC, and that the Cabinet Member agrees with Portsmouth City Council making contributions of £250,000 over the next 3 financial years. So the RCC is a collaboration of local authorities in the south east of England focusing on addressing critical care placement challenges in children's social care across 18 local authorities, and that includes Portsmouth. The cooperative proposes a shared investment approach to reduce costs while improving outcomes for children in care. And our contribution is set at £250,000 over 3 years, starting at £50,000 in 25-26 and increasing to £100,000 annually thereafter. And this funding will support the RCC's operation and the creation of new care placements. The RCC emerged from a successful bid in 2024 from the DFE, making the South East one of 2 Pathfinder regions. And the initiative addresses pressing issues such as escalating care costs and insufficient placements. Portsmouth spends £3.2 million relating to, or spent, sorry, £3.2 million relating to 18 children in 2023-24 on high-cost external care, and that figure is projected to rise by 41% in 24-25. By comparison, the RCC annual cost for Portsmouth equates to just 10 weeks of one high-cost placement. So it's anticipated that the cooperative scale and collaboration will provide us with significant benefits. Key strategy priorities for the RCC include improving data analysis and sufficiency forecasting, enhancing market influence, and jointly commissioning care for children with the most complex needs, and aims to create 40 new residential beds funded through the DFE capital grant of £5 million. Benefits will include reduced costs, stronger provider relationships, better workforce training, and the alignment of foster care recruitment within regional needs is anticipated as well. It's designed for long-term impact, so the first couple of years will focus on reducing unregistered placements, improving data transparency and creating more local care options. And by year 3 and beyond, it's expected to stabilise provider relationships and there's a potential for in-region secure accommodation and better quality care at reduced costs, which will obviously ultimately benefit children to remain closer to home and enhance their overall care experience. Our participation in the initiative comes with safeguards, so there will be a service level agreement which will monitor performance. Legal frameworks will protect us should the RCC not meet expectations, and in addition, our Director of Children, Family and Education will be actively involved in the project board to ensure that our voice is heard and central. So to conclude, the RCC provides a unique opportunity to collaborate and address systemic issues locally in children's social care, leveraging regional data and collectively bargaining power to drive change. And by joining the RCC, we stand to benefit from a coordinated data-driven solution that will not only lower costs in the future, but also ensure better outcomes for our children.
Thank you, Mark. Hannah, any comments, questions? No, I mean, it's a no-brainer, really. One child in a stable placement, and we've got our money back in and some. And also better outcomes for young people because they'll definitely be in the southeast and therefore going to be nearer. So I can see no reason at all why we wouldn't leap at the opportunity to work more strategically with our partners. The recommendations are that the Cabinet member agrees with the proposed scope and purpose of the South East Regional Care Cooperative, and that the Cabinet member agrees with Portsmouth City Council making contributions of £250,000 to the South East RCC over the next 3 financial years. That is so approved. Mark, please don't feel you have to remain with us for the rest of the meeting. I always think that that's a bit weird if people feel they have to. So thank you very much. Please get on with your day. And item 4, we are going to be talking about the annual SEND update. And the person delivering that will be Kate, I think.
Well,
or is
in
it
fact,
Mike?
it will be,
or are you
it will
tag
be me.
teaming?
Yeah, so I will be delivering the report, providing a summary, but Kate, as the Head of Inclusion and also the author of the report, will be on hand to answer any specific questions regarding the report. So, briefly, and as Councillor Pitt has already said, this report covers the annual update on special education needs and disabilities in Portsmouth and responds to the request from the Ordinary Council meeting of the 16th of July to provide that annual update. Very briefly, just going through the report, the overview in section 3 gives details of the strategy that we have for SEND and also alternative provision, and you can see 7 objectives there with work streams attached to each objective. We have a SEND app board in place, and it's also worth noting that we are leading in the South East the SEND app programme, which responds to the reforms set out in the previous government's Green Paper. We leading that on behalf of the South East, working with 3 other local authorities. Also important for the Cabinet member to note that we are due an inspection under the current framework, and we are well prepared for that, and we have a draft self-evaluation framework in place to support that work. So likelihood that we will be inspected in this year. We'll wait for that call. Also important to note, and I'll come on to this in later sections, the significant increase in children who have special education needs. It's not just the volume that is worth noting, but also the increase in complexity of need, which is putting a significant pressure across our system, and in particular in terms of funding, the pressure on the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant that funds the provision. We are in a favourable position in that we do have a surplus reserve in terms of our DSG. That is not the case for many authorities, and you'll be aware that some authorities are within the DFE programmes, DBV and SV. We are not in that position. We don't have the level of scrutiny that DFE is looking at those authorities, but we know that unless we are able to address the demand that we are seeing and we are forecasting, then that reserve will quickly disappear and we will be in a deficit position. So we are acutely aware of that, and we have plans in place to address that. Section 4 deals with the SEND needs in the city. I won't go through the detail, but just to note that we're not out of kilter with other local authorities. So in terms of the proportion of children with EHCPs, 4.7%, very similar to the national picture, 4.8%, and those that are on SEN support, 15% compared to just under 14% across the country. So not out of kilter. We then provide details in terms of needs at primary, secondary and specialist. Again, I won't go through the details, it's there in the report. We also do our forecast, so we are looking at what we're going to need over the next 5 years. Important to note that in terms of specialist places, so those for the most complex needs, we are looking to create approximately 150 additional specialist places across our special schools over the next inclusion centres over the next 5 years. We have already identified 46 of those places in the Amiga Centre development, which we are hoping to have ready for 2027. Section 5 looks at our SEND provision and reflects our very inclusive strategy in Portsmouth, making sure that we've got local provision for our families through our mainstream settings, schools, early years, further education, our specialist settings and alternative provision, and also the inclusion centres that we have operating across our mainstream schools, providing enhanced provision on those sites. Again, I won't go through the detail of that provision that's set out in the report. But also, I think worth noting that we are firmly committed to providing local provision, and the number of out-of-city placements we have are fairly low compared to other local authorities. So we want to continue with that approach and make sure that we're delivering good quality local provision. The last section deals with the rise in educational healthcare needs assessments and associated plans. We've seen a significant rise, and there is a table in the paper showing that rise. And at the same time, over the last few years, we've had issues around the capacity to respond to that demand, particularly in terms of capacity within our EP service, education psychology, and also within our SEND service, both of which we've addressed, and we've put a recovery plan in place to address a very significant backlog, which unfortunately has developed since the pandemic. We are on track to address that backlog, and whilst we have dipped significantly in terms of performance, in terms of timeliness, that 20-week statutory requirement, we are now looking to get back on track and get back to 20% and above in this year, and hopefully we will continue with that improvement in future years. So that is all in place, and we set out in the report the work we've been doing to support that recovery plan. That's it in summary. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Hannah, questions?
Thank you, Mike. Not really a question. Well, actually, it is a question. I'm completely telling not the truth there. When in the report, when it says about school places, primary, secondary, because the HCPs go up to 25, why is it further education not included?
It is included, perhaps not as prominently as it should be, but Kate, do you want to just pick up on that?
Just move along a bit so you can hear me, Hannah. That's a good question, and some of our post-16 provision would be captured into our specialist school placement provision, so for example, some of our Mary Rose provision, but we wouldn't necessarily commission our post-16 places in quite the same way. So we don't tend to think about needing to commission particular numbers in the same way that we're commissioning those school-age placements. You're right that some EHCPs can continue up to the age of 25, but for the majority of young people they don't, and that's for very positive reasons, that young people move into post-16 provision and out again into employment or other activities.
And just worth noting that we work really closely with those post-16 providers, particularly the City of Portsmouth College, which delivers the majority of that provision in the city. Yeah.
The only other thing, because I mean, I remember, years ago, we were absolutely amazing at the 20 weeks and hitting that. And I know that since COVID, the numbers have increased. Does this have an impact on home to school transport as well? Has it had any impact there? Or?
Well, it will do, yeah. So obviously for many of those children with the HCPs, we provide home to school transport, and because of the backlog, that's not only having an impact on the DSG high needs block. As we get through that backlog, it puts more pressure on that revenue budget, but also, yes, home to school transport is impacted as well. Having said that, we are managing that really carefully. We are, I think, just within budget at the moment for this financial year, perhaps with a small overspend, but bear in mind it's a £3.3 million plus budget. We're doing pretty well to keep within that. Again, if you go to other local authorities, we are seeing significant overspends on home school transport. We're not in that position.
that was the only thing to place on record, is that we are, compared to other our statutory neighbours, we are, you know, excelling in that respect, and I think that's really great to hear from this report. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. I agree. My question from me, when you look at the table in 4.12 on page 5 or 13, depending on which pack you're looking at, it does feel like we've seen a big growth post-COVID, and you are predicting that that's going to slow down over the next 2 or 3 years. I just wonder what the rationale is for the slowdown.
I think that's a really good question. I don't think there's probably one simple answer to that. So in order to forecast places that we think we need, we're looking at birth rate data and other data as well. So some of that will be impacted by the number of kind of live births that we're having in our area, as well as to which proportion of those children are likely to require something specialist moving forward. As we all know, the kind of data around everything hasn't behaved quite in the way that we'd expect post-COVID. So there is an element of looking at year on year at our data and building further forecasts from those, but to be reassured that the data we have there is based on our kind of population data as well as our SEND data. So we're as confident as we can be that it does reflect what we'll need moving forwards.
Okay, anything else, Hannah? No, and nothing else from me. It's a noting report, so it is so noted. Thank you very much. Which takes us to item 5, which is school funding arrangements for 25-26. Are you two tag teaming on this? Yeah, who's going first? Angela.
Thank you. The report builds on the December report with the further information that we have now received. And the report seeks approval for the final stage submission to the Department for Education for mainstream school funding for primary and secondary phases. And it also informs the meeting about the progress being made for the other dedicated schools grants budgets. In terms of the mainstream schools funding proposals, we've not changed them from the December paper. The funding the authority received was 0.6 million less than the proposed formula, but the authority did receive falling roles funding and growth funding. And when we looked at the information for both, not all of that funding was needed for those purposes. So we were able to meet all the shortfall and meet all those formula requirements, and this left just under £300,000 of funding, which we have transferred to the high needs budget on a one-off basis, as was one of the proposals in the December report. The report also confirms the de-delegated amounts for schools improvement, where we were waiting for pupil numbers, and that is £10.65 per pupil, which is a 23p increase from 24.25. For the early years, the consultation on the hourly rate formula concluded, and the report contains the summarised results in section 8, and the details, responses and the proposed hourly rates are in Appendix 5. For the high needs budget, the report just details the changes to the place funding, and the full proposed budget will be brought to the February meeting. And I'm happy to take any questions.
That's quite clear. Thanks, Angela. Anna, no questions? Alison, anything you wanted to add?
Sorry, nothing to add.
No, okay. There are a number of decisions that I've got to approve here, so I'll go through them one at a time. We're going to approve the proposed changes to the mainstream schools revenue funding arrangements as set out in section 5 and appendix 2. That's approved. Approve the school revenue funding pro forma appendix 3 for submission to the ESFA on the 22nd of January. Approved. Approve the use of the carry forward on the school's specific contingency for the same period in 2025-26 as set out in section 6. Approved. Item 4, approve the budget to be held centrally for the payment of central licences negotiated nationally for all schools by the Secretary of State. Approved. Endorse the use of 24-25 underspend on the growth fund for use of the same purposes in 25-26. Endorsed. Endorse the budgets to be held centrally specifically as set out in Appendix 1 of the report for the Schools Forum admissions, duties retained by the local authority for all schools and centrally employed teachers' pay and pensions grants. Endorsed. 7. Approve the place numbers for special schools inclusion centres and alternative provision settings as set out in Section 9 and Appendix 4. approved. 8, approve the early years funding formula for under 2s, 2, 3 and 4-year-olds as set out in section 8 and the budget as set out in appendix 1, approved. And 9, endorse the delegated unit values in relation to the school improvement monitoring and brokerage grant of £10.65 per pupil, endorsed. I think that's the lot, and that concludes the meeting. Thank you all for being here today.